Welcome, welcome, welcome. This is going to be a bear tutorial. So let's get started. Now this is a little bit longer of a process than previous classes because there are a lot of layers to add for the fur as well as colors, and I want to make sure that you get them as accurate as possible. So we will start with the eye here, and it's the usual, of course, starting your eye out with a black outline. Whatever you see in the reference image is basically what you want to replicate, and most of the time the eye tends to have a black outline and mostly a black eye as well. Especially for the smaller portraits. As you get larger portraits, get into those, of course there's going to be more color to that, but for this one it's pretty simple. You want to stick with the black here, and of course make room for the highlights. You really want to be sure about that and keep your pencils as sharp as possible for this. Now there is a bit of brown in the eye, so let's go ahead and use just a tad bit of brown and a little bit of like a grayish brown, something that's not too red, too warm of a color, and use that and just very lightly in small circles incorporate that into the eye and leave room for that highlight, of course. Now you can see that the eye is, since it's from an angle, looking sideways, you want to draw the eye as if it were looking straight forward, where that head is facing essentially. So you will see a lot of white in the eye because of that. And I am using a white color pencil to burnish that area, which is basically smoothing out, blending all of the area where it's white, blending that in with the darker colors there. So that's what I'm doing there. And then I'm using a pale pink to incorporate a little bit of color into the whites of the eye there. And I did erase just a little bit to fix that eye a little bit, but if you think your eye is great, don't worry about fixing anything. You can always make little adjustments as you go, or towards the end as well. I do suggest trying to minimize your mistakes because the colored pencil does not always erase very well, and you want to try to avoid that as much as possible. So that's what I'm doing here. I know you can't really see it as I'm trying to draw this small little eye, but right now I'm just trying to do some touching up here and work on making sure that that eye looks as sharp as possible. With smaller portraits, it is a little bit harder to add in certain details, so you really want to make sure that your colored pencil is as sharp as possible. That way you can get in those details for the smaller portrait. So I'm moving on to the second eye ear here, and it's very small, not much detail to it, so you really just want to kind of sort of incorporate that, and there is a little bit of fur that comes out of there, so that's what I am doing right there, is just doing those short little strokes. So now we can move on to the head here, and using a light gray. I'm using a light warm gray, and what this will do is apply your first layer down, And then over the top of that, you can add more colored pencils to it, and it will easily blend between all those colors that you're using. So now I'm using, switching to a light warm brown colored pencil in just a second, and I'm already working on the top of the head. Now I tend to like to work from the eye out or left to right, one of those two. And the reason why I draw left to right is because I'm right-handed and it avoids smudging as much as possible. And I like to draw the eyes first usually because well, now it's just really habit, but I think that drawing the eyes first kind of give that the portrait personality already. So it really starts the portrait off with a strong beginning, and that's really why I like to do the eyes first. So, you know, if you can imagine doing the top of the head and filling in the rest of the head with the nose and everything without the eyes, it just looks weird. It looks like they're not alive yet, and to avoid that is why I draw the eyes first. So now with the light warm brown, I am drawing short strokes in the same direction as the fur that you see in the reference image, and using very light pressure, of course. Want to make sure that we're getting basically the foundation of the portrait down before we get the detail in. So go ahead and start with that foundation between using the light gray and the light warm brown. Use those two and follow along and see where I am applying that. And I will be incorporating that in this ear as well. Now I am using the black to darken certain features of the bear here, and you want to make sure you still have a light pressure, very, very light pressure, short strokes. One key thing that I didn't really think about until I was teaching a student the other day, if you are having a hard time with pressure and you're doing too much pressure or too light of a pressure, try practicing how you're holding your pencil. If you hold your pencil very close, you tend to have a heavier pressure. So if that's the case, just hold the pencil a little bit further back, kind of at an angle with that sharp pencil, of course, and try doing short strokes that way. Try practicing it that way, and you'll start to notice it's a lot easier to draw with a lighter weight when you are holding the pencil further back. So if you want to try to practice that, go right ahead. This is a great portrait to practice that in because there's going to be lots of short strokes going into this fur. Now this ear does have a variety of colors in it, using light warm gray and light warm brown mixture in there. And now we can move on to the darker brown here. This is just a normal brown, warm brown, not something too light or too dark. And we're going to use this to build up a little bit more layers already on top of what we have put down, and then some. So you'll get to use this brown to add, to build up your layers from your first layer to your last layer. Now what this does is, using the same color, even if you were to build up your layers with the same color, it still allows you to see that texture coming through. And that's one thing that I have tried and tested before, building up your layers using, just one direction, or doing small strokes like your first couple layers, just doing like getting that base down first, whether it doesn't matter which angle, whatnot. And I noticed that it's not nearly as good as when you are drawing in the same direction as the fur already from the beginning. Now you can work with larger sections and incorporating that first layer in larger sections, as long as you're still drawing in the same direction as the fur. That is the best way for you to get your details in without it looking like a big old mess, essentially. And now we get to incorporate this red brown. I absolutely love this color. It is great for warming up your portrait, whether it be normal brown color, or just, certain highlights that have a warmer tone to it. I love using this red brown colored pencil. And the name of that colored pencil is Burnt Sienna. It's a Faber-Castell Polychromos. So if you really want to know what types of colored pencils I am using, rather than just the color itself, let me know, and I would be more than happy to provide that information for you. So this one, I'm using a sepia, which is this gorgeous, like a black brown color. It is great for building up dark areas that are not necessarily black kind of a warm, dark area. And I use this for basically every portrait that I make. I always incorporate sepia into it, and I've seen other color pencil artists claim that they do the same thing, or that this is one of their favorite ones too. So if you don't have this colored pencil, I highly suggest getting it. You can get dark sepia or light sepias through, I think, all pencil brands, honestly. Now this one is a Faber-Castell Polychromos colored pencil, but you can also get a variety of sepias and other colored pencils, such as the Caran d'Ache Luminance. Now what I did there is I'm using a light warm gray color, and I am burnishing the right underneath the eye there, and that'll lighten it up and it'll blend the layers together. So that's what I did there. And we can go back to the sepia here and start to really build in the details in the top of the head. You can definitely start to see that it is coming together pretty well. Now if you need to take a break, or you're struggling with anything, let me know, and I would be more than happy to help you out and provide you with whatever you need for you to be able to draw this portrait here. It is a little bit complicated just because there are so many layers to it, and you wouldn't think that a bear would be pretty difficult to draw, but with the fur looking so different from one angle to the next, it can definitely be a challenge for sure. Now we've gotten pretty far with the top of the head here, using the sepia to darken up certain areas, and of course later on we will be able to fill in the gaps there. I didn't want to fill it in completely because I wanted to be able to blend it a little bit better while still showing the highlights. So with this light warm gray, that's kind of what I'm doing here, is blending those areas together. And you can use a pale pink to do the same exact thing. I noticed that underneath the fur there was this warmish pinkish tone, so I am incorporating that a little bit. Now I don't really use the pale pink from here on out. It really is just for the head here, but if you wish to incorporate it for the rest of the body, feel free to do so. It is a great way to blend the features together while still keeping that warm tone. Now I do use a pale blue to do the same thing, so I'm basically going back and forth between the pale blue and the very light pink colored pencil. Whichever one you feel is better suited for the portrait, because there's a lot of warm tones and cool tones. Now that's one key thing that I like to tell my students, is that don't be afraid to mix up your warm and cool tones. Now you can use, I've noticed warm tones are great for the low lights, and then cool tones are great for the highlights. So if you think about that while you're drawing, and use the cool tones for your highlighted areas, your portrait will really start to pop out. Now for the ear on the left side, we're going to start out with a red brown and really just start with drawing the direction of the fur, and then with a brown go on the outside and kind of start to build the outline of the ear there. That way you get a good foundation as to where the ear is placed, and also kind of get it blended a little bit so that you can have other layers built on top of that. Now this ear does look pretty scattered in terms of the fur. The hard part about the bear is that the fur is pretty scattered and misshapen and whatnot, so it's kind of hard to at least for me, because I always want to have the strokes be as even as possible. It's kind of hard for me to let that go and just let the fur be wild, essentially. So feel free to just have fun with it and still try to draw the fur in the same direction that you see. But with the bear, the fur is just kind of all over the place. So that should be quite a challenge, but a lot of fun at the same time. So now that there's a lot done with the ear here, I'm going to use a black and start to darken the sections that are really dark, a lot of the shaded areas. And of course, don't worry about making it look perfect, because a bear does not look perfect. So just work on building short strokes and making sure that you're drawing in the shaded areas and not where the highlights are. So now that we have the ear done, let's go ahead and use the brown and establish the first layer of the rest of the bear's head here. Now I'm working left to right on this piece particularly. So we're gonna do left side of the bear, and then we'll start to work our way to the nose there. So we'll get this first layer going, and you can see that the fur comes out kind of at a curve, so you want to try to replicate that as much as possible. And remember to hold your hand a little bit further back on the pencil to lighten up the pressure there. So I did just use that pale blue a little bit. You don't really have to per se, not until a couple more layers down. Sometimes I just like to play around and see what works best. That's one thing that you will start to notice as you're doing these little portraits, is that you'll start to establish your own opinions and experience by trying things out for yourself. So if you think that maybe one thing should be done a different way, feel free to go ahead and try it out for yourself. Now I am using a black colored pencil here, and it is a darker section right here, so that's why I'm doing a little bit of the black there and then a little bit on the cheek as well. So once you have those first few layers down with a brown color or the sepia color, once you have those established, putting down the black will warm up the black a little bit more than if you were to just put the black colored pencil down straight. That's one thing that I like about adding layers, is if there's a cooler tone area, you can use cool tones first and then put down your black colored pencil and it'll still look cooler, or vice versa. Alright, so now that we have worked on the face here, we're going to move on to the nose. I tend to like to take a break between other features and work on the key features such as the nose, the mouth, and the eyes, kind of on my own time, just depending on how you feel, really. So for the nose, I'm doing a pale blue as the base because in the highlighted areas of the nose, it has a lighter, cooler tone to it, so that's why I'm putting that as the base. Not for all of the nose, just the top part really, where you can see that highlighted area. And I know you can't see it too well, my hand is in the way, but we are doing the outline here of the nose. You want to use a gentle amount of pressure here and build up this first layer, well, really the second layer of the nose with a light gray. And I'm kind of doing small tight circles for this, and the reason why I'm doing that is so that you get an even amount of pressure across the whole nose. So if you do small circles in that way, it allows you to have an even amount of pressure, which makes it so much easier. And with the black, I know you still can't see it here, but I am drawing the nostrils with a black and doing just still a light first layer. And usually I either do a light first layer or just straight up darken with a heavy pressure in the black with the nostrils, because it's just, you know, straight up black, and what else are you going to put down? So that I will either do one or the other. And the only reason why I don't do a heavy pressure for some is so that I know where they are located closer to when I am done. If I need to make any corrections, I can erase it easier if I had already used lighter pressure from the beginning. Let's use that same black and apply it to the center of the nostril, and it does come down at an angle. Since this face is not straightforward, everything is going to be at different angles, so you just have to be aware of that and make sure that you are drawing it as accurately as possible to the reference image. So I hope that so far you're doing pretty well. I know it's quite a long start to this portrait. The face is really what takes the longest, and then the rest of the body doesn't take nearly as long. And you'll start to notice that in other portraits, if you are doing the face first, the head and the facial features, it takes a lot longer than it does for the rest of the body. So you can always plan ahead if you know that the head's going to take longer, then make more time for that, and vice versa. So just remember that in advance. Doing these, drawing the features are going to take a little bit longer because you're You really want to make sure that all of your proportions are accurate as much as possible, and it does take a little bit longer to do that, so just be aware of that. So now that we've got a good part of the nose done, I am using a light warm gray and the pale blue. I did not put that in there, but I am using the light warm gray and pale blue, mixing those two in the highlighted areas of the nose and burnishing it all together. And then we can add more detail on top of that once you have a pretty good solid foundation for the nose. And the nose doesn't have to be too dark. There's going to be a lot of highlighted areas for it. So we can move on now to the rest of the face here where the nostril is, or where the muzzle is, and use that light gray. And we're doing short strokes, very light short strokes for this area because it is very much highlighted. So that's going to be our base layer. Now that we have that first layer down, let's go ahead and use that same light gray and apply more pressure right around where the mouth is. And now we can get to the fun part where we outline the mouth here. Now, for this piece, it is going to be a little bit difficult because it is such a small piece. You want to make sure that you are drawing within the lines that you had put down, and or making sure that you just have the right angle. It is a little bit difficult to make sure that it's going to be perfect, of course, but what I'm doing here is using the black to draw underneath the mouth there, and then there's going to be a little bit of a gap, so just remember that. Now the bottom of the mouth is going to be a mixture between black and the sepia color, so just have those two handy. and make sure you're drawing kind of at a curve where it looks like the fur is grinding out alongside the mouth, basically, and draw that bottom line there with the sepia. I know this has been a pretty long first part. Usually they're about really 45 minutes to an hour long rather than an hour and 18 minutes long. That's crazy. But this bear has so much detail to it. I just want to make sure that everything is incorporated in there. And, you know, it is pretty nice because the previous classes, I try to stick with you know, feature, or not features, but like subjects that are a little bit easier to draw. But this bear does have a lot of complex features, believe it or not. So really want to, you know, make sure that we are getting those as accurate as possible for a miniature portrait, of course, and have fun while we're doing it. So I'm sticking with drawing short strokes to emphasize the type of fur that the bear has. That's one thing that I had mentioned previously, is that the fur in the bear is rather complex. And now we get to warm it up even more in the facial features here. So use your red brown colored pencil and very, very lightly just incorporate some of the warm tones here, and you know, not everywhere, just in certain areas. What this is doing is kind of showing where the sunlight is hitting onto the face there too, because there's, you know, when a bear moves, or even in pictures that you see in the sunny areas, you can see that some of their fur reflects as this reddish orange color. So definitely want to incorporate that in there, and just very lightly do it. You don't have to do it too rough. this light warm gray is great for blending certain areas, especially since it is a warmer tone. So I'll be using that a little bit to blend between the layers, as well as this light warm brown. Now this one, I know there's a lot of colors that go into this portrait, but it is very important to have a mixture because in some ways, the more colors you use, the more vibrant and more realistic the portrait looks. I know for me, I tend to stick with similar color palette, and I've tried to challenge myself and try all different types of color palettes and different colors and whatnot. And that's something that I think it helps you learn over time by trying out different colors. So if you don't have these type of colors, feel free to try something out that's a little bit different that you think might work better than something like this light warm brown, or using pale blue as the highlight, things like that. Feel free to think for yourself and think about something like a color that you wouldn't think to use but might actually look good in it. I know some people use very like a dark navy blue sometimes for the undertones and black dog portraits or black cat portraits and whatnot. And I've done that before too, and it really makes a difference. So I encourage you to try new things and try different colors and different techniques. That's one thing that I really want to emphasize as much as possible. Alright, so now we are closing to an end here, just about another minute. And thank you so much for watching part 1. I hope that this hasn't stressed you out too much and that you will come back for part 2 and finish up the rest. But the rest should go a little bit quicker than just the head part. So I'll see you next time.